Well, hello again everyone, and welcome to another episode of my brakes rebuild project. Now, of course, what started as a relatively simple job really to just replace those brake discs. It hadn't even failed the MOT, it was just an advisory that I was trying to address, and we're now up to episode 9. And this has been remarked upon by several people. Most people expressing some sympathy with the difficulties encountered. Many people offering helpful suggestions, and a handful of people straying a little bit towards taking the mickey out of me a bit for taking so long to get it done. However, we must surely now be on the home stretch. Maybe this episode, maybe the next episode, we will get the van back on the road. Alternatively, perhaps in millennia to come, the last spaceship to leave a stricken Earth will receive a message sent from the last handful of survivors left over from the collapse of civilization amid the smoking, flaming wreckage. One of my future descendants, perhaps the grandchild of my grandchild of my grandchild of my grandchild of my grandchild, who's had this quest handed down through the generations, will send a final message of hope to the survivors travelling out into space looking for a new home, that finally the brakes are working on the Citroen C25 motorhome. So, what's been happening with the brake lines? Well, today's Monday, and the last video was finished on the previous Monday, and in that video, as you might remember, I had spoken to the supplier, or the company that supplied me with the brake lines, and a very positive, very helpful conversation. And they said if I supplied the measurements, they'd make me up some replacement brake lines to the correct length. Now, I sent off that email on the Friday evening. I didn't able to measure the lines obviously until I got home from work, so that email went off on a Friday evening, and I was hopeful that I'd be able to continue on with the brake work this weekend just gone with the new brake lines. I hadn't heard anything by Thursday, so I gave them a call, and they were still very helpful, but it just seemed a bit less positive. They said that they weren't entirely sure they had the tools or the parts to make up the lines. They were going to have to check, so clearly not a great deal had happened between me sending my email and ringing on Thursday. So I thought to myself, well, even if they get straight on with it after my call, I'm unlikely to have the replacement brake lines in my possession to crack on for the weekend. So what I did was I ordered a brake line flaring tool and a line cutter, with the plan of cutting down the longer pipes that lead to the back of the van to make up the lengths that I need to finish the front, because the back pipes I think are okay. Well, unfortunately, because I didn't order really till Thursday lunchtime, the pipe cutter arrived Saturday morning, but the flaring tool didn't. So I'm hopeful that flaring tool will arrive tonight, and we might be able to crack on with it in the evenings during the week. Now, I have to say, I have had some very kind and generous offers from people since the last video went up. George from the George and Jane channel has offered to drive over and help me with my brakes, and Puddle Jumper from the Talbot Owners Club forum has offered to make me up some new brake lines to the lengths that I require. Yeah, many thanks to both of them. I'm going to try this flaring tool first before I take anyone up on those offers, because I don't want to waste anyone's time if I'm able to solve it here, which I think I should be able to. I don't think there's anything technically difficult. Throughout, this has been a sort of a supply and availability problem more than anything else. I've also had lots of other comments and helpful tips and things from people, so many thanks to everyone who has made a comment and left some advice and some tips. And yeah, it's been very positive, really, very useful to read all those. So fingers crossed there'll be a parcel waiting for me when I get home tonight. Right, well, I am home, and I have had a brake pipe flaring tool delivered, and it's the one that was recommended in the comments section by Steve, so thank you, Steve, for recommending that. But there are some strangeness and complexities surrounding the flares on these brake pipes. I'll show you what I mean. Now, this is the brake pipe that came off the van. This is the old steel brake pipe. And you can see the flare on the end of it has a flat back to it, and that is what I understand is known as a DIN flare. Now, these are the new copper brake lines that were supplied to me, and these have a flare at the end with a sort of sloped back to it. And this is what I understand as known as an SAE flare. Now, of course, remember, as always, that I am not a trained mechanic, and these are not intended as tutorial instructional type videos. They are just vlogs for your entertainment as you watch us trying to keep our 1990 motorhome on the road. If you have any doubts about working on your own brakes, it's better to contact a qualified mechanic. So anyway, I've checked on the internet, and the wisdom of the internet says that you can use the two different flares interchangeably. I can use the SAE flares that have been supplied in the DIN fittings on the new brake hoses, presumably, and on the master cylinder. So I'm not too worried about that, especially with the copper pipe. The copper should deform a little bit to fit the end of the fitting, so I think that should be fine, and it should take the pressure that we're putting into it. Obviously, we'll find out when we come to bleed the brakes. The difference is supposed to be in the nuts, because obviously the back end of each type of flare is different, so the nuts are supposed to be shaped to take that. So this piece of pipe here is the bit that was labelled left wheel and is really too short for anything, so I don't think we're going to lose anything by cutting an end off this, and we'll have a practice with the flaring tool. So I've got my nice new tube cutter. Let's cut the existing flare off the end of this pipe. And there she is, that's cut off. So, got my instructions here, and the first instruction is to make sure the end of the pipe is cut square. Well, hopefully so. The outside of the pipe must be chamfered approximately 25 thou at 45 degrees. Well, how do we do that? We haven't got a tool for doing that. Maybe we'll just do that with some paper. Just put a little chamfer on there. I'll go and get some. Right, here we go. Just enough to put a slight chamfer on the end. So, we now have to get the tool. And we have to screw the tool into the pipe to within 5mm of the hexagon. So we're going to need a tape measure. Right, 5mm. Pretty much there, I think. Then we have to place the tool onto the pipe. Okay. Then tighten the locking screws by hand, just enough to grip the pipe. There we go. Then screw the stop into the tool until fully tightened. So maybe we don't want these super tightening, just finger tight enough to hold the pipe. Right. Because that's going to position that pipe, I guess. So it's one of them. So that is 5/8. Okay, well that's at the end there. And then tighten the locking screws fully to clamp the pipe. That's with a 10mm spanner. Of course, if you're doing this for real, you'd have to make sure you had the flare nut behind the actual flare, wouldn't you? We've got this one, but of course we probably want that one. Now, we have to put a spot of grease, special punch grease, on the end. There we go. So now basically we just reverse that, tighten it in again, and then that should have done our flare. So let's have a go. I'll do that any tighter. So now undo it. And of course then undo these. I think we have to undo these all the way then to open up the tool, because obviously the end of the pipe is flared, hopefully. So look at that, look. Let's wipe the grease off it. That is a lovely flared end to our brake pipe. So that should go with the DIN nut, and we'll be away. So there we go. That is pretty much how you do it, I reckon. So I think when I do it for real, I'll be a little bit more careful about deburring the inside of the pipe and everything. Maybe just use a little drill bit or something to whiz around and get rid of any burrs on the inside of the pipe. But other than that, I think that was a top job. So we just need to make sure that we use these recovered union nuts for the DIN flares on the ends of those copper pipes. So tomorrow night, I think we might actually get back on the van. Well, it's Thursday morning now, and I've got the day off work, so I'm going to try and get a significant amount done on these brakes, because we really need to get using the van and get away. So the first thing I'm going to do before I carry on with these brake lines is just get some plus gas on the bleed screws on the wheel cylinders at the back, because I think it's never too early to get some releasing oil soaking into them. Right, well, while that's soaking in, I think the first line to run is going to be the shorter line, because it takes the middle route and it's going to be easier to get them in one by one, I think. And that comes from the manifold here. And if you remember from previous videos, it's the top hose going into the top cylinder on the caliper. Now, from the measurements I took off the old pipe, that shorter pipe needs to be 1050 millimeters, and this longer pipe that was supplied for the left front wheel is 1300 millimeters. So I think we can pull this one in and maybe trim it to suit. It had got this one pretty tight bend on it though, which I think would be better off done with the little bending tool. And I've kept the old section of that pipe so I can try and match it up to it. Right, well, that was a fiddly old business, but I think it's close enough. Right, next thing of course is to thread this down through the root of the previous pipe, and yeah, that shouldn't be too bad, hopefully. Yeah, there we go, that's better. Right, let's secure that on there and get it clipped in. We'll keep hold of this because we might need the nut. Well, that was a lot harder than it should have been to get on, but I didn't want to get it cross-threaded, that's for sure. Anyway, we've got a good start on it now, so let's tighten her up. Right, now let's route it under the van. So yeah, there it is. Could probably at this stage get rid of this other brake hose, couldn't we? Don't need that anymore. Yeah, we're quite a bit too long, so I think maybe I'll cut it there-ish. Let's get a pen or something and make a mark. Right, I'm going to mark this off quite generously, I think, because last thing I want is to cut it too short. Here's my little cutting device. I use this countersink just to get rid of any burrs at the end. I'm just going to add my 45-degree chamfer. Not too much of that thing. The important thing, of course, is to remember to put the nut on. And I've recovered this nut from the old brake pipe. Of course it won't go too far up the pipe if it's kinked. Right, so remember last time you screw this in to about 5mm is out. Use a 5mm drill bit to space it. We should be laughing. Slide this on. Let's try and straighten this out a bit. Slide this on till it hits the Won't work if you bent the pipe, is it? Right, okay. Then we tighten this. We tighten this up. We put our daub of special grease on. We lose our little bag. Right, let's have a look, see what we've achieved. There we are. That looks pretty damn good, I reckon. Right, let's get this hose clipped in and the brake line connected up. Let's neaten up the root of this pipe a little bit. Right, now it's time to do the other one. Well, would you believe it started raining, look. That's the reason I took the day off, because it was forecast to rain at the weekend. But I didn't think rain was forecast today. Never mind, we'll have to try and carry on in the rain, I suppose. Right, well, I've looked up what I measured that longer pipe as before, and it was 2 meters 610. So I've got this nice long pipe here. I think this is the longest pipe that came in the kit. So let's measure this and see if it's 2 meters 610, I suppose. So everyone was saying after the last video that the easiest way to measure these is with string. And yes, I can well believe it is. Still haven't found any string. Let's have a quick measure. Well, I reckon that's about 2.7 meters, so I think we should be okay. We may even be able to use this without trimming it, perhaps. You remember the longer pipe on the other side, we managed to lose a little bit on the way, so yeah, let's see how we get on installing this. So this is the line that's actually labelled up in the kit as middle tube rear. So really this is much the same idea. This pipe goes down through there again, and if you remember, it goes all the way over the top through these clips and whiz into the gizmo on the master cylinder there. Right, let's get cracking on that. Well, again, just ended up with a tiny little bit to lose, so I've put this extra sort of S-bend in just before we meet the master cylinder. And you may have noticed I spent quite a bit of time fiddling down here. I just didn't want the pipes to run too close to each other or be in danger of rubbing or interfering with anything like the track rod end on the steering arm there. So yeah, worth spending a little bit of time just to make sure they're routed. Well, it's not really neat, is it? But it's serviceable and out of the way of other stuff. Right, now let's get all the various different clips and bits and pieces back on here and the wire connected up to the brake pad sensor. I guess we're going to have to go with the cable tie solution on those clips again. Right, well, we should be about ready to bleed the brakes. Now, I did have some DOT 5.1 in the garage here because I used that in the Ttxela, but the manual says DOT 3. I've heard a lot of people using DOT 4. Now, essentially, DOT 3 and 4 are both glycol-based brake fluids. So they're pretty interchangeable. The only difference really is the boiling point. DOT 5.1 is also a glycol-based brake fluid. It's quite a bit more expensive, and again it has a higher boiling point and absorbs slightly less water. You can mix them all. All the advice I've read is that it doesn't really matter. You can have a mixture of them in your system if you like, but your system will only perform to the lowest specification one in there. So really you want to try and flush it through and have one type in there. I'm going to go for DOT 4. I've bought 2 bottles of DOT 4. I think the front of the van is pretty much empty now already, and we'll try and get most of the old brake fluid out the back. I've no idea what's in there. I suspect it's probably DOT 4. It must have been changed at some point. Can't be on the original DOT 3 brake fluid, but someone might replace it with DOT 3, of course, I suppose. But I'm not going to use DOT 5.1. I haven't really got enough, I suppose, anyway. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is check that those bleed nipples on the back brakes will undo. Got myself my brake bleeding kit, so we should be able to do it on our own probably. Nikki's out and about somewhere, so there is only me. Well, I've had a look at getting at those bleed screws with the van in the current position it is, without lifting the back and taking the back wheels off, and it's pretty difficult. You could probably do it, but it's pretty unpleasant. So I think the best thing to do is going to be to put the front wheels back on and jack up the back instead and take the back wheels off. Now I could probably run the van up the ramps at the back and then put the axle stands up the front again and get all 4 wheels off the ground. But I think because of the way the van sits, it'd still be pretty awkward to get to that bleed screw. So swapping the wheels around and lifting the back up, bit laborious, but I think it's going to be the best way to do it. Well, as you might have seen, I just can't get the wheel nuts undone on that back corner. I don't really know why. I think I must have been the last person to do them up. I've not had anyone else do any work on the van, unless the garage did something to them when they did the MOT. I'm not sure they really touch wheel nuts as part of the MOT, which is a bit odd, but they are super tight. I think I'm going to have to stop this video here and go off to Halfords and get myself a nice long breakers bar. Well, that's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends. Give the like button a press. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to see some more.